Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today on the 22 underutilized features in Bluebeam Revu, alternate commands, customizations, and navigation shortcuts. We are excited to have Ari Rejtman providing our webinar today on behalf of Digital Drafting Systems. Ari is an AEC technical specialist and Bluebeam certified instructor. Ari, can I have you go ahead and jump to that next screen for us? Go over some logistics. All right, everybody. So all attendees will be muted for the presentation. You can send us questions throughout the presentation in the chat or questions boxes. The webcast will be recorded for future viewing. Bluebeam Revu training is available as well through us here at Digital Drafting, so go ahead and contact us if you're interested in more of that. And for those looking for AIA continuing education credits, please go ahead and submit your name and AIA number in the chat or questions boxes for us, and I will go ahead and note those down. And as we go through the presentation today or for the future, if you guys have any questions, concerns, please go ahead and give us a call at 305-445-6480 or send us an email at info@ddscad.com. All right, let's jump over to that next slide here. So we do have a poll question for you today. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that for us here. So if you can, go ahead and put in your answers here, everybody. Go ahead and submit your answers. I'm going to give you maybe 10 or 15 more seconds here. All right. Looks like we're stabilizing. I'll go ahead and close this, and let's go ahead and take a look at the results. So it looks like a little over half of you have been using Revu for a little less than a year. That's good, though. It's good to see that most of you are using Revu. That's awesome. All right, so without further ado, we'll jump back to our PowerPoint, and I'm going to have Ari go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much, Alan. All right, just like Alan said, we're really excited to be here today to show you guys some underutilized features in Revu. I'm Ari once again, a Bluebeam certified instructor, and let's get right into it. So today we're going to be learning about these features, and I've listed them essentially in these slides. So I'll be going back and forth from our PowerPoint presentation into Revu itself. Why don't we start with the first one? How can we find any tool or command just by using keywords? So if I've used similar tools in other programs, such as the line tool, I can simply search for it. I don't have to look for where the tool is or know where the tool is. I can do this by, let's get right into Revu, by going to the help dropdown right up here. Then I can mouse over find tools plus commands, and this dropout comes here, and I can click into this and I can type in anything. So if I'm looking for line, I can just type it. And now I just learned that by typing in line, I can actually disable line weights as well. And that function happens to be right down here on the bottom right. So if I zoom in and I see some normal line weights, some thick lines in this area, for example, I can temporarily turn all of them off and make them as thin as possible. This is very, very good for snapping to certain lines. So I could use the line tool, for example, and I can see a little box appearing on top of the lines, and the box actually fills itself in when I get to endpoints, intersections, midpoints, and quadrants on circles, for example, such as this circle here. So that's basically how we can find any kind of command or tool in the program. So if somebody has told you, oh, Revu is really great for comparisons and overlays, but you don't really know where those functions are, what icons they have, you can just type in the word compare, and there it is. We have compare documents right here. And overlay is the same thing. And now we can see that if you have Revu Extreme, you'll have access to batch tools. So you can use the batch overlay feature as well if you need to. So that's our first underutilized feature in Revu, and that feature actually was introduced in Revu 20, so it's extremely useful and relatively new. Next, let's look at the status bar. Almost everyone that I've trained has never heard of this bar. It's not turned on by default when we use Bluebeam Revu. So I talk about it in almost every webinar and every time I train people. So if you've heard this before, sorry about that. But just in case you haven't, we can go to the Tools dropdown, mouse over Toolbars, and there are 3 toolbars at the top here that are very important toolbars that are only found by going to this menu in the way that I showed you. Because if you right-click next to a group of tools, you're going to get some of the common toolbars, but not the 3 major toolbars that we saw at the top of that list. So we can access that from here. Our status bar is at the bottom of our screen. We can see the words select region containing markups, for example, and we can see these buttons grouped up here, along with our scale and our page size and some coordinates that will change as we navigate throughout the page. So you can see that wherever I move my mouse, those numbers in the bottom right are moving slightly. So we can see how that coordinate system works. And we can also determine that 0, 0 is found on the upper left of our drawing. So that can be very useful when you're synchronizing pages and looking at drawings that have different page sizes. So let's go back to our PowerPoint really quick. Actually, no, so let's explain the status bar before I move on. So the status bar is very important. Let me actually turn it off and then on just so you guys can have a visual of what it looks like. So now it's gone, and there it is. So these instructions down here, this text in the bottom right, is quite useful for many different functions because it essentially teaches us how to use these functions and alternate functions within them. So if I was to click on the highlight tool, now the text changes and it tells me how to use the highlight tool. And if I wanted to start a new segment but continue using the tool, I can just press enter, meaning that I can highlight, click and hold, and then enter, and then click and hold again, or I can let go. So either way basically works. So that's how we can use that tool. I've also switched to the select tool down here, which is why it says select region containing markups. And if I use the pan tool, which always defaults whenever you open the program, it simply says the words ready down here. So I prefer to use the select tool because now I can make a large box over items and I can essentially delete them. I'm going to be going over the select tool pretty soon as the webinar continues. So now let's go back to our PowerPoint. And I'm not going to go through the entire status bar. I've already talked about it probably in almost every webinar that I've done. All the functions in the bottom right are toggles, so we'll get into that probably throughout this webinar and in other webinars. Now, number 3 is interesting. There are sometimes visual bugs with the navigation bar. What are they and how do we fix them? Well, our navigation bar is found right above our status bar. So it happens to be this bar up here where we can choose between one full page and scrolling pages. We can switch between different pages here with these arrows. We can also type in pages down here. So I can just type the number 5 and there's our 5th page, for example. So we have a lot of options here. Now, sometimes when we switch between profiles, weird things happen. So I'm going to switch to the Review Advanced profile. This time it didn't happen. The navigation bar is not partially hidden or missing any functions or features. So we got very lucky in this instance. Let me switch back to another profile. Let's try the quantity takeoff one and see what happens. This one seems to be okay, just the status bar is not turned on. I'm going to switch back to my profile now and let's see what happens. There we go. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So I just switched back to my profile and it's not as noticeable, but you can kind of see that part of this bar is covered. And I've seen it at different intervals. Sometimes it covers it partially like this. Sometimes almost the entire bar is gone, but you have a sliver of data in the bottom area here. So this is kind of interfering with some of my features, and sometimes it actually scrunches features together so that we can't see all of them, and they're actually hidden within a dropdown. So how do we fix it? All we have to do is turn the bar on or off. So we go to Tools and Toolbars, and we turn Navigation bar off and then on. And now it's fixed. You can see that the entire bar is now showing. It's not being cut off at all. So this happens commonly when you install the program for your first time and create your first profile. This is a very common thing that happens. So let's go back to our presentation. How do we use Review to browse the internet? Well, it's actually very easy. There's 2 ways to do it. You can have Review automatically open a web browser whenever you start it up. You can do that by going to Review and then Preferences. And under General, we can see that Open Home Page in Web tab on Startup is an option. This will make Review open a little bit slower for older computers, so I don't recommend doing it like this. Instead, whenever you want to use a web browser within the program, you can go to the Window dropdown and then click on Web tab right here. So this is extremely useful, and I think that basically you guys can get some functionality out of this. It'll be easy to open links and set hyperlinks by doing it like this. So here I have a web browser now. My address bar is right up here, and this is basically just like using any other web browser. So Review is also a web browser, not just a PDF management software. Let's go back to our presentation. And number 5, customize our shortcuts and remove redundancies. So when we use Review for the first time, sometimes there are duplicate shortcuts that we see. Now on my personal profile, I've already gotten rid of them. I've also been training a lot of clients, so I've actually gotten rid of a lot of redundancies. But let me switch to another profile and show you some redundancies that should already exist, although I think I cleaned this one up as well. And that's okay. So I can still show you how we can customize the toolbar and remove extra redundancies. One example of that is the Flatten tool. It's right up here. It looks like a yellow press. And usually it appears in more than one toolbar. I believe it appears in this toolbar, which I believe is the document toolbar. So we don't really need it to be in 2 toolbars, so we can save a little bit of space. Also, the hyperlink one may also be present twice. I recall that it was in 2 toolbars. So how do we get rid of these extra tools? All we need to do is go to Tools and Toolbars, and then go all the way to the bottom to Customize. Now we can choose which tools are part of which toolbar. One good example of this is that I want to add the Erase Content function to this toolbar that's currently selected, which is the advanced one. The advanced one has flatten, cut content, etc. Actually, we can see that the icon for Erase Content, which is right here, is also found up here. This means that we're going to have a redundancy and we don't need both of them. But I do want Erase Content next to cut content and not separate from it. So I'm going to turn it on in our items list right here. All I had to do was make sure that Advanced is selected in the toolbar at the top, and then I turned on Erase. If I switch to different toolbars, then those functions for that toolbar will then appear. So let's find the small toolbar here that has these. I believe it is Document. There it is. I knew it. And Flatten used to be there, and all I did was I turned it off. So you can see that Flatten is now off. I'm now going to turn Erase Content off as well. This is just going to have 2 features. You're going to see that this is going to change right here in my shortcuts. So I've removed some redundancies and added an extra feature. I've essentially moved a feature, so to speak. So I'm going to click OK. And there it is. The changes were made. Now Erase Content is part of this toolbar, and we've gotten rid of the extra Erase Content that was part of this toolbar. And so that's how we can customize our toolbars. Now I'm going to go back to that dialog just for a second to show you guys how to do this from scratch. Let's say you wanted to move a feature into another toolbar that didn't exist already, that wasn't already in that list. All you need to do is start from the upper left, and under categories, you can choose between different functions that exist in the program itself. They're not necessarily turned on in your profile or in Review itself right now, but they exist and are possible to turn on. For example, I can go to File, and I can add Save As, which is one of the first things that I teach clients, to my toolbar. I can also scroll to Toolbar here, and I can find the File toolbar that's currently turned on in my profile and see which functions are part of it, and there's Save As. So there, it's not here by default, so I'm actually just going to get rid of it temporarily. I'm going to add it back in. So Save As is now on the left side under Commands, under the categories. Now that I'm in the correct toolbar and I can see my items, I'm just going to make sure that Save As is selected, and I'm going to click on this arrow right here to add the command to the items list. Here it is. Save As is all the way at the bottom. I'm going to use my blue arrow keys, and I'm going to move it all the way up so that it's right underneath Save, just like it was before. And so that's how we can easily customize our toolbars. I recommend that everybody adds Save As to their toolbar. And you can also go and make sure that Edit has all of the functions that you need. You can even turn on more functions under Edit, for example. Here we have another option for Flatten and Snapshot, but luckily we already have Flatten up here and Snapshot up here, so we don't need to turn them on unless we'd rather have them in this toolbar, for example. So there's a lot of different ways we can customize Review, and it's relatively easy to do. So I'm going to click OK. Perfect. Now it's refreshed my shortcuts at the top and everything is looking great, including Save As, which is right there. Let's go back to our presentation and let's look at the next one. Drawing straight lines and activating alternative functions in the same command. That's actually very easy to do and very cool because we have so many more features that we can use when we do this. So how do we draw straight lines, or anything straight for that matter? Well, we can use the line tool. Here's the shortcut for mine right up here. And right now, when I draw this line, I can never draw it straight. I can eyeball it and make it kind of straight, but it'll never be perfect. So all I need to do is hold the Shift key. And now I've activated what I like to call temporary ortho. I'm also a CAD and BIM specialist, so I know a lot of terminology from those programs. So now you can see that I can draw not only straight lines, but also lines at 45-degree angles. So this is quite nice. Now, while I'm drawing a line, I can also activate my control key instead of shift. And at first, it seems like nothing really happens. Let me show you a common issue that a lot of my clients have had. So in our status bar, we can actually turn on Snap to Grid along with Show Grid. Now, some people accidentally press the keyboard shortcuts for Snap to Grid. Control Shift and F9 are the way to do it by default. So somehow some people do it accidentally. I don't know how. So I'm going to turn this on because a lot of my clients have had this on without realizing it. They never had their status bar turned on either, so they never saw any of these toggles. And they would basically contact me and say, how come when I draw lines, it isn't letting me draw where I want to go? It's like making me snap to certain parts of the drawing. And they would have no idea that they're actually using Snap to Grid. And then they decided to do some tests and they said, when I hold the control key, it overrides whatever that is and allows me to draw wherever I want to. So basically, if you're using Snap to Grid and you actually intend on using it for a certain function, and you want to temporarily stop and you don't want to have to toggle the function on or off, and you're in the middle of drawing, all you need to do is hold the shift key. And now you can draw anywhere you want and override Snap to Grid, for example. So as soon as I let go of shift, now it's forcing me to snap to those certain spots on my screen. So the control key is very useful in that feature. It's also extremely useful when navigating your file. So what happens when I switch between different navigation schemes? Firstly, I just double-clicked my middle mouse wheel in order to fit my drawing onto the page. This is called Fit Page, and in other programs, it's called Zoom Extents. So if I was in the middle of my screen and I double-click the middle mouse wheel, I can now see the whole screen. Secondly, if I switch between different modes, such as the ones down here, one full page and scrolling pages, the control key becomes very useful once again. So right now I'm using one full page, meaning that I can zoom in and out of my drawing by rolling my mouse wheel forward and back. Then I can switch to scrolling pages, which fits the screen width-wise as well as height-wise, but not necessarily height, it just fits it in the width. And now if I scroll down, or if I move my mouse wheel down, it only moves down or up. I cannot zoom in or out anymore. What is nice is that I can navigate between all of my pages very quickly just by scrolling. If I was in one full page mode, I can't do that and only one page is being shown at once. Now, what if I wanted the best of both worlds and what if I wanted to activate some extra functions? All I need to do is hold the shift key, and depending on which function I'm using, different circumstances occur. So we're going to start with one full page where I can zoom in and out. Now I'm going to hold the control key and I'm going to scroll forward, and I just switched to page 3 very quickly. And now page 2, and now page 1. So I can hold control while in one full page mode and quickly use my mouse wheel to switch between my pages. It's extremely easy and a really great way of navigating between pages without having to change your page number down here or use these arrows, for example. So you can continue working and keep your mouse in the center of the screen while just holding the control key with your left hand, just like this. Now, what if I switch to scrolling pages? Now I'm going to hold the control key and I can now zoom out again. So just like how I could zoom out in one full page mode, I can now zoom out one more time while holding the control key. And because I'm in scrolling pages, I can see all of my pages all at once. They're not isolated anymore. So what's really cool is that I can zoom in to a certain extent. Let's say I want to zoom in about this much. I'm going to let go of control now. Now I can essentially move my mouse wheel up and I can see all of my pages at a fixed distance. So this is a great way to get, once again, the best of both worlds and to be able to zoom in and out while scrolling up and down. So now I can zoom in and out, I'm holding control, and when I let go, I scroll up or down. So that's how control can activate some alternative functions in Revu. And this happens with almost every single function you can think of. The line tool was an okay example, while the scrolling pages and one full page modes are really, really good examples of unique features that you can only get by holding down that control key. So that's how control works, and that's how we can draw straight lines. Let me switch back to one full page mode. Let's go back to our presentation. Number 7, create and reset page labels. This is actually really cool. I haven't quite shown this in a webinar yet, and I worked with a client on this, and it's really, really neat how we can do this. Firstly, let's get into resetting page labels because it's a really easy way to number your pages very quickly. And I've actually already done it for my pages here. But what if my pages were named some odd things? For example, I can just double click on the label here, which just happens to be the number 1. And I'm just going to call this, let's say that the name of this floor plan was Floor Plan Bluebeam. And then maybe the second one had its own name. Oh, that didn't go through. Floor Plan Enter. There we go. You have to press the Enter key. Now let's just rename this one to A2.2.1, for example, and then enter. And we'll leave the rest as they are. So what if we wanted to quickly get all of our pages to go 1 through whatever the pages are? All we need to do is go to the thumbnails and reset all page labels is right here. So this is essentially giving us a warning when we click on this. Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to change our labels. So that could undo a lot of work if you were manually changing the labels, but there's no need to do that anymore, and I'll show you why. We're just going to click yes. There it is. Now 1, 2, buckle my shoe. All the pages are now labeled very, very easily. And that's how that works. Now we're going to create page labels very quickly without having to type in certain numbers for each one. For example, our pages have these numbers down here, A2.2.1. This was part of a set that Bluebeam provided back in 2018. Now our second page and our third page are very similar. They're actually the same floor plan without markups. I actually added a couple of markups on this one right here. And I use pages 2 and 3 for comparisons and overlays. You're probably familiar with that if you've seen my other webinars. Now, these pages down here are named the same down here. But what if they were named something different? Well, I'm actually going to show you guys another underutilized feature as we get into this. Let me see if it's on this slide. It is not quite. Let me check the next slide. You guys get a sneak preview of what's to come. And there it is. So select and edit text. So we're going to go into that right now in order to answer the previous one, how to create page labels. Because I want page 2 to be labeled differently from page 1 and page 3, of course. So we'll say that this is going to be point 1, this will be point 2, and this one will be point 3. How can I edit this text very quickly without having to go back into my CAD or BIM program and changing the actual data in my title blocks or in my views, my sheet views, so to speak? All I need to do is go to Edit, PDF Content, and we have Select Text and Edit Text right here. We also have those two functions we saw earlier, Cut and Erase Content right here. So I'm going to use Edit Text right now. It's going to detect all of my vector data text in the drawing. That's why that little loading bar just happened. And all of my other assets are actually very faded out on the sheet, except for vector data text. So we can see that all the office labels are very dark, along with most of the text that we see here in our title block. So I'm actually just going to modify this one super quickly just by clicking once. I can now delete this number 1. I'm just going to use the delete key for that, delete in the wrong order. And now I'm just going to put the number 2. And it automatically detected my font. We can even open up properties and we can see that this is Arial bold according to our font. And we can highlight this text and it'll also change the font. So this text up here happens to just be Arial instead of Arial bold. So actually really, really nice to be able to edit text and check the font on text that's on a PDF. Now I recommend editing one line at a time. And when you're done editing, just press the escape key. Sometimes text that's next to other text will be modified if it's on the same axis or line. So you'll want to be very careful when doing this and check and see if your other text was changed. Luckily, in this instance, nothing was changed here. So I'm going to demonstrate it one last time. We'll go and edit this text, and I'm going to get rid of this 1 and put a 3 and press the escape key. So it's quick and easy to edit text and make last-minute changes for your submittals whenever you need to. Now we have all of our labels ready to finally demonstrate how we can create page labels very quickly and easily. So I'm going to click on Create Page Labels right here. It's in our thumbnails list. You can also find it by going to Document and Create Page Labels is right here. So we could use existing bookmarks if we wanted to for our page labels. Instead, I'm just going to use Page Region and click on Select. But before I do, I'm going to choose my page range. I could do it for all the pages in the document, but in this instance, I just want to do it for pages 1 through 3. So I'm just going to type 1 to 3, and then I'm going to click Select right up here. Now it's going to ask me for a region that's similar on all the pages where the page label is. This is why it's very important to have your title block put in the same spot on all of your pages and have all your labels basically in the same area. Now, instead of making a very small box around this label, I'm going to make a big one, assuming that we could have extra text in the label area, and perhaps certain letters or certain numbers will be bigger or smaller than others. So I'm going to start from the corners and draw basically up to here. If I wanted to, I could also include this text here. This would basically make it level 02 floor plan A2.2.1 and so on and so forth for all the other pages. But I don't really want to do that in this instance. I just want to get this text right here. So I'm just going to make the box and I'm going to let go. This is our first region. We don't need any more regions. We're essentially done. But if we wanted our page label to contain more information from other parts of the drawing, we could add another region if we needed to. We're essentially done for now. Our preview shows that it detected the text correctly because it's vector data text. So this worked very, very well. Now we're going to click OK. Now, basically, we're ready. All of our pages are set. Our page region has been chosen. I'm going to click OK again. And there it is. Our labels have now been automatically created in our thumbnails list. We can see a 2.2.1, 0.2, and 0.3. So that's how we can create page labels very quickly from data on our pages already. It's a really, really cool tool. Let's go back to our presentation. And let's see, number 8, managing and deleting signature fields. This is an interesting one because it seems very difficult to get rid of a signature field after you make it. It's very easy to make, of course. So when we first make our first signature fields, we go to our signatures panel, looks like this ink pen icon right here. And then almost everybody that I know just clicks on sign document, and they essentially make their field however big that they want it to be. And then it immediately, the review immediately asks us to log in and sign our document. Let's say that we made a mistake, we need to make a change before we sign. So we're just going to cancel out of this. So now I have this field here. And if I right click on it, nothing happens. And if I click on it, I can sign it. How do I get rid of this thing? It is so frustrating sometimes. But that's okay. It's actually very easy. Let me switch back to my profile because I have some sidebars that are not visible in this profile and I don't want to worry about them. If you want to turn on other side panels, you can right click next to one of them and mouse over show, and you can see the full list here. So the one that I'm looking for is actually the forms side panel. This is only available with Review Extreme. So you will not see this side panel if you don't have Review Extreme. You can check and see which version you have by clicking on the review dropdown and clicking on About. So in the forms panel, what I could do is I can see all of my different form fields. This includes signatures, text boxes, radio buttons, check boxes, drop downs, all kinds of things. So I can actually click on any of my signature fields. So let's click on this one, which is the third one that I just made. All of my signature fields are now dark blue, including all form fields, such as these text form fields up here. Now that they're dark blue, and now that there's grips around my field, I can right click on top of it, and I can essentially copy it, cut it, delete it, and actually modify it whenever I need to. I've now entered into what I call form mode, because now I can modify form fields. So I can drag it around, right click and delete it, and this is how we can do it. Now, if I click on the form field, it just selects it and puts grips around it. I can't sign yet. I actually can't really make any markups or click on any of my markups. When I mouse over my markups, my mouse is not changing anymore. And that's because I'm not in the regular mode of review, and I'm in a different phase, so to speak. So if I want to exit form mode, all I have to do is press the escape key. Now I can utilize my form fields. So for text boxes, I can click inside of them and change their data. By the way, look what happens when I change the data in this first text box. These two text boxes are automatically adding their data together and giving a summation in the third text box. So I set that up in my properties area. So I can show you guys that in another webinar. It's not very important for today's content. So now I can essentially click on my signature fields again and sign. So this is basically a really nice way to see how we can modify form fields. Now, what if I didn't have the forms area? And you can still sign without having Review Extreme. So I can't use sign document. I actually kind of could. I can click on the function and then click on a form field, and that kind of works. But you could also use add signature field. I prefer to use this over sign document because it allows me to create signature fields, and then I'm still in form mode, so I can modify them after I create them, move them around, for example, make them bigger or smaller, delete them, and that's it. So add signature field, in my opinion, is much more flexible than signed document. Signed document is a very quick way of quickly signing a page. So you can essentially use either or. And once you activate one of these functions, you've entered back into form mode. Whenever you see your form fields turn dark blue, you're in form mode. And when you press the escape key, you've left form mode. So let me just enter form mode, get rid of this one, and then press the escape key. Now I can click on markups like I was able to earlier. All right, so that's how that works. Let's get back into our presentation. And we're going to manage our autocomplete entries. It's very, very easy. What is an autocomplete entry? If I'm in properties and I have a markup selected, and I have certain subjects that I've assigned to my markups in order to categorize them and in order to perform quantity takeoffs and cost analysis with my markups. So I want to change my subject to something different. I actually have another one that's called exterior. So when I type the letter E, I have two autocomplete entries that appear. I actually have this Excel example that I was using with a client, and I have this exterior category, this subject that I usually use. So I'm just going to switch this to exterior. All right, that's how that's done. Now, how do I manage my autocomplete entries? Because I had a client that was actually, they had a bug with their keyboard and they were putting a space after all of their text. So when they were looking for something, they were actually not able to find it, even though they were typing the right words, but that extra space made a big difference. So we can manage this by going to the review dropdown and clicking on preferences. Then under the general category on the left side, we can then click on spelling at the top. And here is enable autocomplete, which we can turn on or off. I think it's very useful and saves a lot of time, so I leave it on. And we can click on manage right here. Here's where we can see different categories. So under the author tab, I have myself twice. My full name is Ariel, but usually people call me Ari. This is my computer's username, so it automatically picked that up and applied that as my first username whenever I was making markups. So that's still in the list. I can get rid of it actually right now, and I think I will actually. So I'm actually just going to get rid of this. And there it is. Now I just have my two names. And if I wanted one of my names, I can get rid of the other one as well. Now, let's go into another category. There's no email because I haven't used any email ones yet. There's many different kinds of labels that I've used for measurements. You can only apply labels to measurements. Then we can look at search. I've searched for different kinds of assets and text on the drawing, so that's pretty easy. And then here's subject. So it looks like there's actually a subject with an apostrophe here. I don't know how that was made, so that's a mistake. I'm going to get rid of that one. Then I can check these and make sure that there's nothing here that's lowercase or there isn't anything here that is not standard. But yeah, everything here looks fine and there's no duplicates. So all of my subjects are good, so I can click OK. And that's how we can manage our autocomplete entries. Now, I clicked OK, and Review took a little bit of time just now to solidify that process because it was checking to see if there were any markups that had my username in it. And it basically got rid of that field in those markups. So now I'm going to click OK again. And now my autocomplete entries have solidified and they've essentially saved after I click OK in preferences. So that's how that works. Let's get back into our presentation and let's look at number 10. Change your scroll wheel sensitivity. This is a really cool one of my favorites and very easy to do. Going back to preferences, we go to review and preferences. We can then go to navigation, make sure that general is selected on the left side and then navigation. And we have sensitivity right here. By default, our sensitivity is set to 4 in Bluebeam Revu. This means that whenever I roll my mouse wheel forward or back, it's going to go forward or back around 4 lines or 4 pixels of text. It depends on what a line is, and in each program it's a little bit different, but it's essentially one line, so to speak. Now, what I recommend is that you change it to 3. That way, when you zoom in and out like this, it isn't so drastic. And I've set mine to 2. This means I need to roll my mouse wheel more in order to get to the same location. So if you need to quickly zoom forward and your mouse wheel is not very user-friendly, then that's not a problem. I happen to have a very comfortable mouse, so I would actually rather roll it forward more, but be able to really center myself properly on a certain part of the drawing, such as this area right here. So that's why I set mine to 2, and that's how you can do it as well. Let's go back to our presentation. Number 11 is fix visual bugs, pages loading slowly, and rendering issues. Now, I've heard of a lot of these issues, and I've actually experienced some of them a few years ago in an older version of Revu, in Revu 2018. Some people's computers are different from other people's. So what will happen is that you'll open up a file, and for some reason, if there were any colors in that file, some of those colors don't register. Some people will also notice that as they navigate around a file, Review doesn't really load itself very quickly, or the program just lags and is very, very slow. So how can we fix any of these issues? Well, we can go back to our preferences, so Review and Preferences. At the bottom, we can go to Advanced. And then we have these two options here. And as you can see in our presentation slides, I've actually essentially taken a screenshot of this and shown this, because this is essentially very, very important features and settings right here. So these features are our rendering engine and our rendering mode. The rendering engine should fix any visual errors, such as colors not being visible or pages not loading certain assets. Then you can change it. Now, Review will choose whichever one it thinks is best for you. Never Legacy, of course. Legacy is for very old computers, but it'll choose hardware or software for you. Hardware seems to be much more reliable, so I'm using hardware. I also have a relatively powerful laptop, so you can also switch to hardware and see if that fixes it if you were using software. But some people have the opposite scenario where their hardware isn't powerful, and so by using software, it still fixes the issue somehow. So you can switch to either or and see what happens. Under rendering mode, I learned about this very recently at a convention. This is a really cool thing. Now, by default, iterative draw means that as we navigate and draw on our document, Review is constantly refreshing the document in the background. So certain parts of the document that we don't see, so right now if I zoom in on this part of the document, we're not really looking at other parts, but it's still taking up memory on my computer and it's still basically rendered. So when I quickly go to other parts of the document, Review quickly is able to refresh it. It doesn't really take a long time. So I'm going to go back to preferences and switch to wait for completion, which has helped a lot of my clients. This means that only whatever I'm looking at will be refreshed. And so if I navigate to another part of the document very quickly, if I had a slow computer, it would actually take a little bit while and it would be a little bit more blurry in those parts of the document. Now, because my computer is relatively fast, I actually am able to load everything without any speed issues. So I don't really have to worry about this, and I can't really tell a difference on my computer, but I have many clients that really benefited from switching to wait for completion instead of iterative draw. I'm going to go back to iterative draw just because it's a little bit faster and I have no need to wait for completion. All right, fantastic. That's the first half of our underutilized features. We've already talked about one of them on this slide right here. Let's start from the top. How do we change our display name in Studio? I've had so many clients that made a display name like they were back in the 90s and AIM was a thing. And we all had funny display names with different acronyms and numbers and things. So some people have done that when they're working with their colleagues in Studio. And then their colleagues ask them, hey, what's your first name? What's your last name? Can you please write it out whenever I look at your name in Studio sessions and also in Studio projects? And so they said, yeah, but how do I change the name? So you can actually do that very easily by going back to Review and Preferences. Under General, or excuse me, under, I believe it's, Studio, yes, of course, it would be under Studio. And then you go to Servers, and here, once you're logged in, you can change your display name. Right now, it's grayed out for me, so I'm actually going to sign in through here. I could sign in by going to the Studio dialog, but I'm going to click on Sign in right now. Whoops, it actually was signing me in the whole time. I thought that it was bugged. Oh, that's so funny. I signed myself out. Oh, well, I'll sign myself in really quickly. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Let me just get in so I can show you how cool it is to change your display name. 1 second, I need my password to be typed correctly. There we go. Excellent. So let's let that load. There we go. So now I'm signed in and my display name is visible. Now I can edit it. So if I wanted my display name to be my full first name, Ariel, I can do that and I can click OK. It will now change the next time I use Studio. If it doesn't change and you're in the middle of using Studio, you might want to close out of Review and open Review again, and it should refresh itself. So that's how that works. So that's a cool little tidbit. Now let's look at number 13, rotating pages and views. There's a big distinction here, and that's why this is on the list. We have two different ways that we can actually rotate our document. One way is by going to View and Rotate View, and we have these two functions, clockwise and counterclockwise. We also have these shortcuts in our bar at the top of the screen. So here's mine right here. So I can use these very quickly. Now I'm going to go to thumbnails and show you what happens whenever I rotate my view. So I'm going to rotate clockwise. and you'll see that all of my pages have rotated. However, I've had clients call me and say, I rotated my view, but when I go to print, it's not printing. What's going on? And that's because rotate view is a temporary measure and it is not really affecting the document itself. So whenever you rotate, you're rotating everything. And it's kind of like, the analogy that I like to use is, it's kind of like tilting your head to the right. Now, if you're looking at a piece of paper, which is a PDF in this example, the PDF and the piece of paper don't move, but we're tilting our head. So that's what rotate view means. Now, how do we actually turn the paper, but keep our head fixed, so to speak? So we can do that by going to our thumbnails list, the 4 squares button right here. We can click on the thumbnails dropdown, and we have rotate pages right here. So there's rotate view, which is these two functions, and rotate pages. Rotate pages is what I prefer to use. It is much more permanent, and you can rotate one page at a time. For example, instead of clicking on the thumbnails dropdown, I can simply right-click on a page, and I also have rotate pages right here. So I'm going to rotate the second page, for example, rotate pages. It's going to ask me if I want to do just the selected page because I had it highlighted. I could click on the dropdown and say, no, I want to do all pages, but I'm just going to do selected 2 for now. My direction is right here. I can go clockwise, I can go 180 degrees or counterclockwise. Let's go 180 degrees just for fun. And then we'll click OK. And there it is. My document is now upside down. So I'm going to quickly rotate that back. Now you'll notice that I only rotated that document, so it's much more flexible to use rotate pages as well. So another 180 degrees, okay, and now we're back. And the document has been rotated successfully. So that's the difference between rotate view and rotate pages. Number 14 is snapshots. How do they work? I actually learned something very, very useful about snapshots recently. So I'm going to show you what I learned. Snapshots are great. You can access them with this icon here. You can also find them by going to Edit and Snapshot. So I'm going to make a snapshot around an asset that I want to use for the future. I want to find one that's relatively clean, and I think that my favorite one will be this sink right here. So I'm just going to make a nice box around the sink with a little bit of white space because the white space is not really detected, but it's good to have a little bit of white space. So what happened was that I just made a box around this, and you saw the box kind of highlight itself, and now it just shows the box itself, the border of the box. What I thought we needed to do was we needed to copy and then paste what was now on our clipboard. It turns out that when we use the snapshot tool, it's already copied the asset for us. So if I do Control V for paste, there's our sink. So snapshots are much easier to use than I thought. You don't really need the keyboard for them. You can simply just make a snapshot around something, and then you can even just continue using your mouse, right-click, paste, and done. So that's how we can make snapshots of assets in our drawings and how we can quickly do them without using our keyboard. A client of mine taught me that, and I'm very happy to have learned. We always learn something new every day. Let's go back to our presentation. And now let's look at flattening. What is the difference between quick flattening and the flatten dialog? Well, we have many ways we can flatten. I can take any markups. I can actually just take a group of markups. So I'll just use the select tool and select these two right here. I can right click and I can simply flatten the markups here. Now, if I do this, this is a permanent thing. And the only way I can undo this, so for example, I've just flattened these two markups right here. The only way I can undo this is by using the undo button. If I save my document, that means that these two markups are flattened here basically forever. And there would be no way to undo the flatten. Let me just undo a few times to get them back. There we go. My markups are now movable and editable. So how can I flatten things temporarily and then have the ability to unflatten them later? Or even better, how do I flatten all 6 pages, all the assets on 6 of my pages very quickly without having to highlight each page like this and highlight all the assets? That would be a little bit crazy to do if you had 100 pages to deal with. So that's where the flatten dialog comes in. We can find it by accessing the flatten button in our shortcuts or going to document and flatten. This is the flatten dialog. Here we can choose multiple files to flatten all at once and specific pages in those files. We can choose what kinds of assets we're going to flatten. So we can select them all by just clicking on the box next to type and deselect them and just select, for example, just images, for example. So that's very easy to do. You can flatten all markups. If there's any filtered markups, we can exclude them from the flattening process. This is where filtering becomes very useful. And if you just want to flatten a group of selected markups with the flatten dialog, highlight them first and then just use currently selected markups. Then we can allow for markup recovery and in parentheses unflatten, and we can see the unflatten button is down here. This is the option to allow for all markups to be unflattened if you need them to. Don't use this for submittals, of course, but if you want to flatten something for internal use so that it's visible in other PDF programs, because sometimes markups are not visible in other PDF programs unless they're flattened to the page, because markups are created from different programs and they're considered different assets. So that's where you can flatten them for readability, but have the option to unflatten them as well. It's very, very nice. Before flattening, I recommend that you always have a copy of your page so that you don't accidentally lose your work, but markup recovery and the unflatten tool can help prevent that as well. So this is how the flatten dialog works, and that's the difference between quickly flattening by clicking on a markup and then right-clicking on it, and using the flatten dialog through this shortcut right up here. Now it's about 2:46, so I'm going to go through the next ones pretty quick because I want to have about at least 10 minutes or 5 minutes of questions. So let's get to it. What is the difference between depth, width, and height in Bluebeam Revu? This is actually a really interesting thing. I'm going to take this area right here and I'm going to open up properties and I'm going to turn on different captions for this area. So I'm going to click on edit next to caption and I'm going to turn on the depth, width, and height. Now, this is very strange because what do these actually mean? The width here in this case is actually the horizontal length. We can prove this by using a measuring tool. Let me turn on snap to markup so I can snap to the corners of this markup and measure it. And so this 16 foot 4 7/8 is matching the width. So this is the width of this markup. The height of the markup is actually the vertical length. So in this program, height is not depth. And depth, we can't see it here because we're looking at a PDF from the floor plan point of view, but the depth of this markup is 8 feet. This will change if I go to our measurements panel. The markup is selected, so now I can modify some properties of it. And so for some reason, it's set to 8 feet as a depth for concrete. Let's change that to 6 inches. There it is. Now that I've changed it here in my measurements panel, it's also reflected on the drawing with this label. So our depth is used for volume and other calculations. And that's what depth, width, and height mean in Bluebeam Revu. And what does length mean? I forgot to mention that. Let me actually turn that on really quick so that you guys can see what I'm talking about. The actual length, there it is the perimeter. So it's adding up 16 plus 16 plus 22 plus 22 and all the inches in between to get about 78 feet. So that's basically how length works. Length is the perimeter of whatever asset you're using. And in this case, this is the area tool, one of the most flexible measurement markups in the program that I love to use. So that's how all that works. Let's move on to the next stuff. Custom scales. How can we add custom scales to Revu? Well, a lot of you have already gone to set a scale, you've calibrated your page, you can go to the measurements panel and click on calibrate here. There are preset scales by default, so you can click on this drop down here and look at all of these preset scales for architectural, engineering, and surveying. But we also have a custom option. So this is where I can type in any number equals any number. So 1/8 of an inch equals a foot is the same thing as 0.125 inches equals a foot. So I could always type in whatever I want to here, change my units to whatever I need them to be, etc., etc. So that's how we can have a custom scale in Revu. Let's move on to signing documents and adding signature fields. Wait a second. I think I already showed a little bit of that. However, when it comes to signing a document, like I said, you can essentially just click on an existing signature field or make your own. So I think we've already gone over that, so let's move on. Cutting and erase content. Yes, I also went over, oh no, I've gone into selecting and editing text, not cutting and erasing content. That's a good distinction. So we talked about it already. We have the cut content and erase content options here. They're also found under edit and PDF content. So erase content is the same concept as cut, except that it doesn't put any of the content on your clipboard. It simply gets rid of it. So if I quickly wanted to get rid of this label right here, or maybe get rid of the number, I could just make a little highlight over that, and it's gone. It's not on my clipboard, so I can't reuse it. So instead, if I wanted to use cut content, let me just undo a few times. If I want to use cut content instead and I wanted to move this label so that it's centered more, I can then select that label. And now I'm going to do Control V for paste. There it is. It's now a movable asset. So I can essentially take this. We can put it right there. I think that's relatively centered. Right click and flatten. Now we're combining different functions together in our workflow. So that's how you can move different assets on your page. And you don't have to worry about going back into CAD or BIM. Let's go back to our presentation. And we can skip these. We already know how to select and edit text. How to turn an image into a PDF and place markups on top of it. This is actually something that I really like to do. So a client of mine had to do this. They took photos and they needed to draw some schematics on top of them. So how do we do this? If I go to File and Open, and if I go to try and open basically an image, I don't really see any images right now because I'm looking for PDFs. But if I look on this drop down here and I click on it, I can then search for images as well. Now that I've done that, all my images in this folder are available to me. So I can click on this image right here and click on Open. Review temporarily makes a copy of this image and converts it into a PDF. Now, this is temporary because we haven't saved it yet, and there's a star next to the name of our file. So that means that we have to save this in order to be able to use this again. But this would use the same name as the image, but it would have a different extension. So it would not overwrite the original image. This is great because now if this was a schematic that I need to draw on, I can start to draw on it just like this. And basically when I'm done, I can do a save or save as and call it whatever I need to. And so this is how we can essentially use images as PDFs and convert them very quickly into a PDF. So I'm just going to save this. Now, it is actually going to ask me to save my image into a different folder because it does have the same name. So I'm just going to go underscore converted and then click on save. Done. This is now a PDF. So that's how you can convert images into PDFs and draw right on top of them and mark up right on top of them. And last but not least, crossing and window selection with the select tool. So I've demonstrated a little bit throughout this presentation. Now I'm going to explain what it all means. If I was using CAD, I would be very familiar with this because CAD has similar features in most of the CAD programs. If I start, first of all, I have to use the select tool. And if I start on the upper right side, and if I draw to the left, I only have to partially cover a markup in order to select it. I'm going to test this by moving over this green cloud and half of the callout template. And I'm going to see if it selects it. So I'm just going to let go. So it did select it along with the green cloud, and this orange cloud was also partially selected. So it still is selected in the selection. So this is called a crossing selection because the box simply needs to cross over something, and that's it. And it basically works. So that's how I was still able to get this circle right here just by crossing over part of it, for example. Now, if I start on the left side and if I move to the right, I'm now using window selection and I must fully encompass something. So I'm now going to let go and see what happens. I didn't get the callout template or this callout right here, this cloud I mean, and the green cloud was not selected either. That's because they were not fully inside of the window. So that's why it's called a window selection. It must be fully inside of the window in order for it to work. And that's it. That's 20 underutilized functions in Review that some people don't know. You guys may have seen some of them in previous presentations that I've given. Hopefully you learned something new. So let's leave off on questions. Does anybody have any questions on anything? Doesn't even have to have been covered so far.
All right, thanks, Ari. Also, before we get into questions, I just want to remind everybody, if you have not yet, please do go ahead and submit your AIA numbers for those of you that would like to receive credit, as well as your names. I am responding to those of you who I have received those from. So if you haven't gotten a response from me, please go ahead and send those over. Okay, on to the first question. Is there a way to go back over the video? If you are referring to the presentation will be on our YouTube channel shortly, and you will actually receive an email with a link to this video as well. So yes, you will be able to. All right, so did I understand that correctly, that a signature field cannot be deleted or altered with the standard version?
Luckily, the answer is no. You can modify it in standard, yes. So let me show you how that works once again. So I'm now going to pretend that I have Review standard. There's nothing here that I'm going to be showing that has to do with extreme. So I'm going to go to my signature panel. I'm going to click to add a signature field. All my signature fields are dark blue, so I can basically click on it, right click and delete. I can also right click on this one, copy, and then paste. And now I have a second signature field. So yes, you can modify signature fields in Review Standard. However, you cannot look at the Forms tab, this Forms tab here, and you can't use other form fields. So only signature fields can be modified. What's nice about Review Standard is that if somebody else creates form fields, you can fill them in. So you can click inside of them and start typing. You just can't modify them. So that's basically the only difference. So you can still use Review Standard to sign and seal documents and to delete signature fields and add signature fields. Great question.
All right. What version of Review was presented?
Review Extreme.
Review Extreme 20, right?
Yes, the Review 20. There are 3 versions of Review. Review Standard, CAD, and Extreme. Standard, I've shown almost everything that's available in Standard today. I didn't go into the batch tools or use optical character recognition, which is called OCR. I didn't go too in depth with the form stuff. But yes, Review Extreme allows you to use OCR, batch tools, form fields, and Review CAD gives you extra plugins that are available in programs like AutoCAD, Revit. I believe Microsoft Word is included in that as well, but it might be included in Standard if I'm not mistaken. And these plugins just give you more settings when you print from those programs and you create a PDF that's used in Review. You don't really need those plugins. You can still print from those programs and create PDFs, but there's more options and it can be a little bit faster. So that's where Review CAD comes in.
Perfect. Okay, another one here. When the line weights are hidden, how do we get them back?
Great question. It's the easiest thing. I've actually had them hidden since the beginning of the presentation when I toggled it on. How do you get them back? There's 2 ways to do it. Or no, I thought that there was a keyboard shortcut, but apparently there's not. So it's this function right here, disable line weights. Now I know that a lot of my clients have had this function, not in the navigation bar here. For some reason, it doesn't appear here sometimes. So if you want to toggle it on, there's 2 things you can do. You can go to edit, or excuse me, view, and at the bottom you have disable line weights. And then something that I actually learned, here's the 23rd underutilized feature of Review, is if you mouse over some functions in these dropdowns, you'll notice a little pin icon to the right of them. There's actually a pin next to full screen crosshair, for example. I'm actually going to pin that, and I want to put it in my status bar, actually. But let's see, is status bar here as an option? No, that's okay. I can go to navigation bar left in that case. There we go. I've now added the ability to toggle very quickly between my full screen crosshair. So here it is. I now have a nice green little crosshair throughout my screen, and I can turn that on or off. Same goes for disable line weights. So we go to view, disable line weights, and then we click on the pin, and you can make sure to add it to navigation bar right, which is usually where it goes. And sometimes it's not there. So that's how you can make sure that it's in a quick toggle, and that's how you can turn it on or off. So that is how you can disable your line weights whenever you need to and enable them once again.
Perfect. Is there a way to not log into Studio every time?
Yes, excellent question. I was not logged into Studio automatically when I opened up Review, and that's because I did not leave off in the Studio tab right here. So basically, as long as you go to another tab, and let's say the File Access tab is now activated, you can keep it open or closed, it doesn't really matter. And then just close out of Review. Open Review again, and you'll see that basically you are not automatically logged into Studio. You can tell if you're logged into Studio in a couple of ways. One, if you have the, let's see, this one is called Document Management. If you have that turned on, it happens to be the toggle for Studio. So I just turn it off, and here, it's this one here that says Bluebeam Studio. So now I have a drop down, and it says that I'm logged in right here. So that's how I can tell that I'm logged in. I'm going to quickly sign out, and I'm going to get out of this tab. And if I mouse over this, it says that I'm logged out, and you'll see that if you close the program while any of these other tabs are activated and not the Studio tab, you will remain logged out until you click on the Studio tab. Then the Studio tab will either sign you in automatically if you signed in relatively recently, or you'll have to type in your password and sign in. So that's how you can make sure that Studio doesn't log you in every single time. It should not log you in every single time unless you're activating the tab every time. So that's how that works.
Okay, I know we're running a little tight on time here, so for those that need to drop off, we understand, but I do have a few more questions, so we're going to work through those here. Okay, Ari, I have consultants that have used this program while I was using Adobe Professional. I've noticed sometimes there are errors when opening documents that have been modified in Bluebeam. Has this been an issue you've come across? The errors usually relate to text.
Yes, exactly. So this actually ties into the rendering engine situation that I explained earlier. So these errors will occur if certain assets are not flattened in those other drawing programs, and markups from different programs like Adobe and other PDF programs, they are basically different. So like I said, you can probably fix them by going to Review and then Preferences, then clicking on Advanced, and change your rendering engine from whatever it is to the opposite, so from hardware to software or software to hardware. Try changing your rendering mode as well. See if that helps. And yeah, you should have no issues. I personally have had no issues. I've been able to view PDFs that were created in Adobe, PDFs that were created directly from CAD programs like AutoCAD or Revit. I opened them in Review and no assets were missing. I actually had a client recently that they were missing the number 1. It was very strange. They would print from their BIM program, and then they were missing the number 1 in all of their PDFs. And it was easily fixed by getting a printer driver and updating it. The issue was not happening in Adobe for them, but it was happening in Bluebeam Revu. And that's because Review had a direct connection to the printer and there was a bug going on. And the printer driver was not updated. And so all you need to do is update your drivers, make sure your review is updated as well. You can click on help and you can click on check for updates to see if yours is updated. An update actually just came out yesterday. So you can all see if you have an update. Mine is up to date because I updated today. So that's basically how you can fix that issue. If that issue persists from any of your consultants, please let me know. I can always create a remote meeting with you and we can troubleshoot the issue together because there's always a solution to these things. If it's working for me, it should definitely work for you.
Perfect. Okay, why does the snapshot only capture partial information in the section window at a time? At times, sorry.
I'm assuming it's because you're trying to use the snapshot on top of a markup. So usually snapshots will only work for flattened data that came from other programs. So all of these assets here, these walls, these labels, all of this was made in CAD. And so all of this you can use the snapshot tool with and have no issues. It shouldn't filter anything out. But if you try to do it on a markup, it will not capture the markup data. So I'm assuming that's what's going on. I don't know exactly what's happening on your end. If you're doing it in a normal area and you're missing data, I can remotely connect with you and troubleshoot that as well. I'd like to learn more about it, and please contact us after this so that we can assist you to fix that one.
Right. Okay. We do plan review for the building department, and about 1 out of every 50 set of plans we received in a format that we are unable to stamp, comment, highlight, sign, etc. Is there a way around this, or is there a recommendation we can give the design professionals to keep this from happening? Sounds like that could be locking, right?
Yes, exactly. Alan is very familiar with this. He has actually helped me with some of this, and we've talked about it. So yes, that's exactly what's happening. Your client that's sending you documents is locking their files. Whether or not they're signing the files and the signature has security permissions, or whether or not they're using fancy security permissions as part of their company policy, or they're actually going to document and security and changing their permissions here, for example. So whatever the case is, you can basically recommend to them to not do it. You can show them what features are missing. So for example, if you're trying to extract pages or make modifications to pages, you won't be able to with certain locked files. So I think that also it'll be best if you connect with me directly so that I can see the file that you're talking about that you received. I can check and see what security permissions are set. I can give you that list and you can send it back to your client and tell them, please don't lock the file. If you need to be able to sign a file after them, there's a very particular way to do so. You can't just start signing files and using document certification and making signature fields. So you have to be very careful, and I can help you with that. It's a very easy thing to fix. I can also connect with you and your clients so that we can communicate verbally to them exactly how to send files to you. So excellent question. I'd be very happy to work with you on that.
Right. Several of us in our office have Review Extreme. However, the interface does not have the same drop-down menu as per the presentation, but rather icons. Yeah, that's the question. So I guess they're missing some of their interface, or it doesn't
Yes,
look the same
so
as yours.
there's two things to explain that. I'm using my own profile, so you can go to Review and Profiles, and you can try to use Review Advanced. Review Advanced is very similar to my profile. Then you can start to turn on more functions by right-clicking next to a group of tools and turning them on from this list. Now, I suspect that you're using Review Standard or Review CAD. The reason why is because you said drop-down menus. For example, my batch drop-down menu has many more features here because I'm using Review Extreme. Review Standard in CAD is missing about half of these functions. For example, OCR won't be there. You can't use batch sign and seal. The document dropdown will have fewer things as well. So I believe that's the case. You have a different version and your profile needs to be changed. So like I said, start with Review Advanced, modify it, then you can go to Manage Profiles and you can make your own profile. I've got a tutorial of this on our website. It's very easy, but just so you know, you would have your active profile that you want to make a copy of, click on Add, give it a name, your screen's going to go crazy, and then that's it. That's how you can basically make your own profile and make sure that you have similar functions that I do.
So what they're saying though is they have icons only, not drop downs.
Oh,
I'm not sure if
I believe that is because this bar up here might be a special bar. There's two things you can do. Make sure that you can see the X button up here along with maximize and minimize, these three buttons up here. If you can, and you're still missing these drop downs, that means that these need to be turned on, which I've never had to do ever. And I didn't know that you could turn them off. Maybe under preferences you can. I need to experiment more into this and see if there's a setting in preferences that you may have accidentally toggled. But if you don't see the minimize, the maximize, or the close button on the upper right, that means that your window is partially hidden, kind of like this. So all you need to do then is just maximize your screen by clicking on the square up here. So I'm assuming, let's hope that that's the case. But if that's not the case, then let me know and I can always submit a ticket to Bluebeam to ask them, how do we turn this bar on or off? So interesting, very interesting question.
absolutely. And if that does persist, feel free to write us here at info@ddscad.com and we'll see what if we can help you further with that one. Okay, I do have, let's just do two more here. Okay, how to draw a line to a certain length.
I love that question. Good, I didn't go into it today, but I will show you. So we have options called sketch to scale tools. It's these 4 tools that have orange grids on the edge of them. You can also find them by going to Tools, Sketch to Scale, and here they are. So if you want to draw a line in particular, you would use Polyline Sketch to Scale. Now I can basically set my start point, so I can start right here. Then you'll see next to my cursor, this reminds me of dynamic input from AutoCAD. You can see that there's a length and a rotation angle. So I can move and see it changing, or I can type 10, the foot symbol, tab to go to rotation. And if I want to draw straight down, I would go -90 and then enter. Now I want to go 15 feet to the right, so I keep my rotation at 0, enter. Then I want to draw one more time, 5 feet, tab, 45 degrees. And then if I'm done, I press enter and enter again. If I move my mouse, I'm forced to make a 4th segment. So I would just do enter again. And I'm done. I've now drawn a line with perfect dimensions. I can even look at these dimensions in properties and I can turn my segment values on so I can see each one individually, just like that. So that's how sketch to scale can kind of allow you to do some drafting in Review, some very accurate drafting, so to speak. So make sure you set your scale first before you do that. You need to have a scale in order for it to work. But yeah, that's how that works. And I have a tutorial on that one as well.
Perfect. Okay, I have one final one we're going to go through here. Why did Bluebeam Revu drop Mac support? Forces me to use Adobe for reviewing everywhere but one of my computers, which you can take, or I can take that one if you want.
I can take that one. Thank you, Alan.
All right.
You know the answer too. So yes, sadly, Bluebeam did drop support for Mac. There's no more updates for it. The program is not has some bugs in it. The reasoning, we can't really tell you. We're digital drafting systems. However, we do have a solution. Luckily, if you're still using Mac and you want to use Bluebeam Revu, you don't need to use any other program. All you need to do is get Parallels or a similar program that allows you to essentially use a Windows operating system on your computer. And through there, you should be able to access Bluebeam Revu for Windows with all of its functionality and capabilities. There should be no issues. You should be able to swap between your Mac operating system and the Windows operating system quite easily. And that way you can have the full access to review and support. So yes, that is the current workaround for Mac users, just to use Bootcamp, Parallels. There's many different programs that do it. Alan, was there anything you wanted to add to that answer?
No, that was what I was going to say. So
Fantastic.
can I
Yeah.
have you jump over to that next slide, Ari, and we'll just close off here? Thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
those that hung around. I know we went a little bit long, but we appreciate you guys hanging around and hearing some of the questions. We want to thank you all for being here today for our webinar. Our blog is live. You can access that through our website on the services dropdown, Knowledge Center, and Bluebeam. There's a lot of really great content up there that may help answer even more questions. Again, as I mentioned, we do have Bluebeam training available. Give us a call or send us an email if you're interested in that. And check out our website for a free trial of Bluebeam for a 30-day free trial. That's about it, I guess, here. So if there's anything else, please go ahead and shoot us an email at info@ddscad.com or give us a call at 305-445-6480. Thank you all and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.